Is it Friday yet? You ever say that to yourself? It used to be a time when Friday was like it, right? But it is Thursday. Happy Thursday. I think the pandemic and all kind of online meetings changed everything. It's just we went from knowing what day it was to now we just go by dates, or at least I do. Welcome to the chicken box. That was random, but you know, some days you just say whatever pops up in your mind. I got my good friends Jay Jackson and CEO of Afro News, Dr. Draper, joining us. If you've never heard of the chicken box before and you're from Baltimore, shame on you. Shame on you. But of course, that's four wings, fries, salt, pepper, ketchup. Just it makes me hungry every time I think about it. But if not, this is a show that started right when the pandemic started. It was going to be a live show, and it turned out to be a virtual show. It's where you come on and you speak your truth. Good thing is, I don't have to agree with you, and we can still go and kumbaya later on. But today's topic, somewhere down north, Dr. Draper,
Yes.
how are you? I'm sorry. I was jumping right into it. Jay Jackson, how you feeling today?
I'm doing very well. How are you?
Right, sometimes it's good to just check the temperature.
Absolutely.
Especially with all these snowstorms up north. Hope everybody is doing well if you're in that part of the country that got hit by the snowstorm. But anyway, let's get on to today's juicy topic. Somewhere down north, we got a special guest joining us. Always love to bring a Morgan alum, but I'm gonna let Jay Jackson give him his proper due
All right.
and introduce him to the chicken box so we can get into a great conversation today. Jay?
All right. So today we have Jason Rhodes, who is a writer, litigator, and licensed clinical social worker. Is a practicing attorney in the state of Maryland, serving as a litigator in children in need of assistance cases. A former adjunct professor and third-degree black belt in Kempo Karate, Rhodes brings discipline, empathy, and precision to every dimension of his work. Raised in the Winbrook housing projects of White Plains, New York, Rhodes learned early that strength and character is the greatest inheritance a family can pass down. With a courtroom honed voice and a storyteller's restraint, he writes the everyday as epic. Grandmothers who anchor families, neighbors who tell the truth, and boys learning to become men with their heads held high. Rhodes earned his Juris Doctor from the University of Maryland School of Law and Master of Social Work from the Catholic University of America. He played collegiate basketball at Morgan State University and was the first male in White Plains high school history to score 1,000 points in men's varsity basketball. He lives in Baltimore, Maryland, with his wife and 3 children, continuing to serve as both advocate and storyteller, lifting up voices of families and communities navigating the hard and holy work of love. So, Jason, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Looking forward to this.
Awesome. And so, of course, you're here to talk about your new book, Somewhere Down North. So thanks. Appreciate that.
Right. So I don't know if you saw the cover, but the cover is actually my grandmother, Dorothy Rhodes, who raised me, and my brother Elgin Rhodes. So we're her grandkids. My father, Eric Rhodes, is her son. Then she also had her daughter Brenda and Michael Rhodes. So from the age of about 2, and this is sort of on the down the line is going to tie in. My maternal grandparents came to my paternal grandparents, which is the woman who you see on the cover, and said, "You are foster care," because we were living with my mother, my biological mother, to the age of 2, and my grandmother, my paternal grandmother, Dorothy Rhodes, took myself and my brother in, and we've lived there ever since. And so when we moved in with her, we moved into the Winbrook housing projects, which she was, of course, already living there. So the book actually came about because later on down the line, 50, 60 years removed, she was in a nursing home and she was suffering from dementia. And so I used to visit her on, a regular basis 2 or 3 times. And then it, shrunk to 2 to 1 day a week because of the strain and stress of that. To watch, I guess, a loved one go through that process, one day they remember this, the next day they don't remember. And even to the point where you're showing pictures of her kids, losing her ability to recall. So I started writing just as a way to, I guess, stress relief. And I started posting these stories on Facebook. And lo and behold, gained a following through the people that grew up in Winbrook, because I'm telling a story about her, but I'm also including all the things that surrounded that or were around that time, which includes the community, which includes other family. So that's how the book came about.
So let me ask you a question. Do you feel, a lot of people have that familiar story, which is being raised by their grandparents, especially in our community. Do you, because you're skipping a generation, do you find that like you're getting a certain level of wisdom from your being raised by your grandmother that maybe you did not see your peers getting? Was that a big difference?
That's a great question. And I think about that all the time, because there is a missing generation as far as my father. And it's only in hindsight that I can recognize that, I would be a totally different person if my father raised me. Just because of who he was and the things that he believed and things that he was into. As it relates to my grandmother, my brother and I had the back room. So her room was a room up, and then there was the next room where my aunt Brenda or my aunt Uncle Mike stayed. This is in the projects in 135 6E. And when I would walk as a young person past her room, I would see her on her knees and she's praying. And at that time, I didn't know what that was. I just was like, why is she always on her knees? Why is she always with her hands clasped and talking? And so one day, I got the courage to ask her. I said, what are you doing? She says, I'm praying to God. And I'm like, who's that? What's that? And she explained it to me. And then, of course, we started going to church and things like that. But that in conjunction with, people coming over on Saturdays and Sundays, and it's people like Miss Edwards or Miss Tina, and they're having these conversations at the table or the dining room table, and there's a wisdom within that, and they're reminiscing about a time that I wasn't a part of. They're reminiscing about their husbands. Some had passed, which her husband had passed when I was 5, which is my grandfather, Curtis Rhodes, and they would be reminiscing. And because they were together, like the projects itself came about in 1950 as part of urban renewal. So they got rid of the streets where they had the Black businesses, where they had the different shops, and they created these projects, which were 5 9-story buildings. And this is White Plains, New York. And the first preference were to veterans, and my grandfather was a veteran. And so that's how they were able to get in. But he also fought in World War II. Now, he left South Carolina early, like 16, 17 years old, lied to get into the Army to go fight in World War II, which tells you how bad it was in South Carolina.
Right.
Now, his father was a white man. His mother was a very dark-skinned woman, and they used to meet in the cemetery because, of course, they couldn't be seen together or whatever. So they had like 4 kids, and the kids turned out to be like redheaded, freckles, and all these things. So even when he came to New York, they're referring to him as a white boy or this or that or whatever. And so luckily for him, he was, he's a boxer, so he could handle himself. So he got respect on that level because, people would try him. And he was known as like Red the Fishman. And so he worked, but like in that community, you walk through and everybody knows your name, everybody's talking to you, and everyone's pitching in. And I got the tail end of that. So they were already there 20 years before I got there, me and my brother. And so what this book focuses on is that part of it, that 1929 to 1980, so to speak, and the reflection.
Man, if you just tuned in, we have Jason Rhodes joining us on the Chicken Box as we talk about his new book, Somewhere down north. You know, you never really hear somebody say down north. It's always down south. So the title, let's dive into the title because you have such an amazing story. Shout out to
So
all Morgan graduates. But my question was,
there you go.
it's very intriguing. And what does it mean spiritually, culturally, and geographically to you, Jason?
So my grandmother's from Georgia. My grandfather is from South Carolina. His sister-in-law was Undina Colvin. My grandmother moved up there with her siblings when she was 12 or 13, and her sister, the head of the family, is Irene Hadley. And so they're coming from down south, right? A lot of the families in the Winbrook housing projects were migrating from down south to up north, you know, for that promise, for, you know, opportunity, for better schools, for whatever it was. And that's who I was surrounded by. Our next door neighbor, we lived on the 6th floor. So you go 2 or 3 doors down, that's Miss Edwards. Miss Edwards was my babysitter, right? And so I told you that my maternal grandparents, they dropped me off and said, you know, either you or foster care. And I mentioned that because, you know, that's what I do now as far as being an attorney. That's the type of law that I practice. And so I'm reminded of every day, like, but for my grandmother taking me in, my fate could have been what some of the people that I represent's fate. And it's not a pretty thing. But going back to Miss Edwards, when I was 2 going on 3, my grandmother had already taken me and my brother in, and my biological mother had a boyfriend who was 10, 12 years older than her and was in a certain game. And they came looking and they convinced themselves that they were going to take us back, right? And my mother was young at that point. So they found our apartment, bust in the apartment, because back then we used to leave the doors open, bust in the apartment and put a gun to my grandmother's head and said, you know, give my woman her kids back, which would be me and my brother. Miss Edwards, Miss Harry, and Miss Bowser bust in, no guns, but they didn't have any guns, but wrestled the gun away from my mother's boyfriend, who had it at my grandmother's head, and beat him outside the door, like just with their fists. Right. And so everyone that I name is a Southern mother. Everyone I name came from down south up north. And there was a certain fearlessness about them because what they had to face down south. You know, if you're talking about the Klan, if you're talking about just, you know, bowing your head or you know, looking the other way, or Cowtown, these weren't the type of women that did that. They would, you know, represent themselves to the fullest. And, you know, around 82, if I fast forward just a little bit, that's when the crack epidemic came. And, you know, that swept through Winbrook. And Miss Edwards in particular, she would go through the hallways and she would take this bucket of hot water and ammonia and throw it down the hallway so they couldn't stand in the hallways. And these, again, you know, these are guys that have guns too, right? And so it's just that fearlessness. And you would see that in, you know, not just those people I named, but, you know, you have the Mines, you have the Robinsons, you know, you have all sorts of families where it's replicated over and over again, because we had 5 buildings. So people used to sit out, it's like 9 stories, and people used to sit out in front of the porch. And, you know, you had the older individuals sitting on chairs and they would watch out, and they, you know, they were basically policing. And they would tell us what to do, what not to do. And this is back in the day where, you know, they could tell me just as well as my mother could tell me, and I would have to listen. You know,
This is all
you had that.
Winbrook
project. At Winbrook Housing Project. Right. So you have that sense of community.
Dr. Drake.
Everyone's looking out for each other.
Yeah. Wow. So thank you for sharing that. I heard you say, and we see in your credentials that you're also a licensed clinical social worker, and that happens to inform your law practice a lot. And you said, you know, you were blessed to, you know, have a different trajectory, like a lot of your clients and a lot of people. So let's see, how do I phrase it? So tell us a little bit about your journey. I have a couple of things I want to ask. How'd you get
Okay.
out? I mean, what was that path to out of where you were? I know you didn't do it independently. It sounds like you had a whole village of support.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
With your grandmother. Sounds like she was a phenomenal person. So how'd you get out? And then the other thing, if we have time, I'd love for you to share maybe just a couple of paragraphs from what you think is one. And it sounds like the whole book is impactful, but from one of your chapters. Let's talk about the first thing.
Yeah, so I have to pull that up, but that's fine. But with regards to how did I get out? So I played basketball at a very early age, and White Plains was known as a sports town. And so if you go from 1970 to 1982, that's what it was. And people would walk around and they'd be buffed and, men, women, everything. And everyone's outside. And our central thing, we used to call it the Mecca, was the playground. So you had these 5 buildings. And then in the middle of those 5 buildings, you had the playground. On the outside of that, you had South Lexington Avenue. And so South Lexington Avenue, you had the Spanish store, you had Esau's, you had the barbershop, you had churches, you had Bethel, you had Calvary. And so it was, a unit. And so everyone knew everyone. And so I remember very vividly in 3rd grade, we used to get to the playground, you would have to come out at that time I was in 135, I then moved to 159. You'd have to come out 135 and walk down, and there's this, on either side, there's bushes, and then you hit a tree line, and the tree line goes over top. So it's really dark before you even get to the playground. You have to walk through that. Now, all the people that used to get out of jail or hustling or doing whatever they do were under that tree line, right? But the word had already been put out that don't ever touch the young kids, right? Don't ever touch anybody that has promise. Don't ever touch anybody that has something going on. And we're not going to pull anybody in. So even the individuals that were into something else, they protected us, right? And I think that's unique. I don't think you always have that. And one of the things I always like to share is my brother and I, we played basketball growing up all the way throughout. And that gives you a certain privilege. People don't really touch you. It's oh, he's going to do this. He's going to be this. He's going to be whatever. So that gave me a pass on some level. But my brother had took the bus one time and he got lost and he ended up in Peekskill. So that's the equivalent to, let's say, Baltimore and PG County, right? And back then we only had the exact change. We didn't have any extra money. So he had no way to get back. And so he goes to this park and he doesn't know what he's going to do. And he's surrounded by these gang members. Right. And it so happens that this guy named Johnny Slade Lindbergh, which was his brother, and Eric Maven. Eric Maven used to be a big football player. They happened to be in Peekskill. And they saw him and they said, that can't be Elgin. Right. And he's 12, 13 years old. He's that can't be Elgin. So they get out and they check. And it was Elgin. And these guys would close in on him with guns, with knives, with everything. And then they stepped in with what they had and cleared the spot and got Elgin and brought him back. And that's easily an incident where I don't have a brother, right, going forward, right? And so when you say, how did I make it out? I think it's through the grace of God. I think it's through, circumstances. I think it's through wonderful people that I grew up with who cared about me and who protected me and protected him. I don't, the thing I love about, my grandmother, my Aunt Irene and my Aunt Dina, they were very kind people. And every time me and my brother would step in any room, it's just it's a celebration. Oh, they're here, boom, 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 boom. So at a certain point in time, I think I'm something because they keep telling me I'm something. They keep telling me you're wonderful, you're blessed, you're this, you're that. And that goes back to, I think, Jay's question about, is there a difference? There's a significant difference because that's how they treated me every single time they saw me, without fail. Every time. I mean, I can go out 2 hours, 3 hours. We used to be outside all day. Come in 8 hours. She act like, she just saw me. Like I'm brand new when I come back in there. Oh, what can I do how can I help? And I try to carry that on, with my kids, the 3 kids that I have, which is, like Asher, Zori, and Jaden's the oldest. And even Jaden, if you look at the book cover, Jaden actually made that book cover.
So okay, and actually, I think that's actually a good segue for what I was going to ask.
Mm-hmm.
You're a writer, you're a litigator, and also a clinical social worker.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it seems like a very far leap to suggest that directly what you experienced, and sort of like you said, if you had grown up with your biological parents, it would have been a significant difference in your lifestyle versus growing up with your grandmother. Did that inform you when you stepped out into the world, when you went off to college, like, this is what I'm going to do? I'm going to make sure that other kids are less likely to be put into those situations that I almost found myself in? Is that kind of an impetus? Or did you fall into
it is, but it was actually this guy named Greg Flournoy. So this is right before I was going to college, and I had a couple of scholarship offers. And the way I ended up in Morgan is interesting too. But I had a couple of scholarship offers. So I was asking him, what should I major in? I was asking a bunch of guys, and he says, I said psychiatry, because I was always interested in the mind and like how the mind works, right? And he says, you need to really consider social work. And he says, you need to really consider social work because it has the mind piece in it. It has the developmental, how one develops human development, and there's more opportunities. So that's originally when I go to Morgan, that's what I'm focusing on. It wasn't until I was a senior when my brother was in law school. He says, man, you should try law school. I was like, I haven't studied law. He says, man, you can go in law from any discipline, because every discipline, law covers it.
Right.
So that's how I get to law school. My brother actually encouraged me to do it. But even before that, there was this a young lady named Kenya Gibson at Morgan. And I remember, I was on the basketball team, and that wasn't going too well for me. But I got my grades back. And when I got my grades back, I had like C's and C pluses and whatever. And I'm sitting there dancing around, because back then it was Proposition 48. All you had to do is have a C and you're eligible. So I'm dancing on the bridge or by the bridge because I got all these C's. And so Kenya Gibson walks by and she's like, what are you doing? I said, what do you mean, what am I doing? Look at I hit my report card out, and she sees all these C's. She starts shaking her head, and she says, you're smarter than this. He's like, what is wrong with you? She said, number one, stop dancing around like a fool. She says, number two, and she was an honor student. She says, let me tell you what I do. She says, I go to my teachers before the test, and I have a conversation. I said, what's going to be on the test? She said, they're not going to tell me what's on the test, but they're going to give me the ballpark. And she says, I go to them after the test, right, to see what I did wrong and what I can improve on. And she says, that way you establish a relationship with them. And she says, if it ever comes between an A and a B, they're going to give you that A. So she gave me the game plan. From that point on, I was in, honors after that, after the first semester. There was no more C's or anything. So that leads into how I get into law school. But up until that point, my mind frame was different. It was about basketball. And so as it relates to your question, everything I think I've gone through informs me when it comes to what I do now, which is center law, children coming into care for abuse or neglect. Now, there's on the really serious cases, there's also a criminal side, but we handle the civil side. So we deal with a lot of the social work aspects of that, which is the human development and how you can make a person whole. And so the things that come out of that are consistency, having a place to stay, stability, and having someone you can count on. Now, everything I've said up until this point, that's what I'm referring to. I've had the stability. I had the consistency. I had the love. I had people telling me I was great. I had people saying they love you. I had people demonstrating that they love you, because you can say you love me, but when you see the demonstration, that's a different thing.
Of course.
So I had that all my life. So when I see in these kids that they don't have it, and I'll give you an example. There was a parent that was absent for a long period of time. And in law, you have to do a closing argument after the case is over, after you presented your evidence and you get to that closing argument. In the closing argument, you basically take the facts that you proved in the case and you string it all together with the law, and then you give a closing argument, which could be like an essay or something like that, about why the court should rule the way in which it rules. Now, I pulled out, in this particular instance, before a judge, the story about Solomon. And the story about Solomon is about, the one lady has a baby and the other one has a baby. The parent, who's really not the parent's baby, died. So she's claiming the other woman who legitimately had a baby, whose baby lived. And they go before Solomon and they said, I can't decide because they're both saying it's my baby. And Solomon doesn't know. He just knows this mother is grieving, this mother's grieving, and they're both saying it's my baby. So Solomon says, I'm going to take that baby, I'm going to cut him in half, and I'm going to give a half to you and half to you. And the one mother said, oh, that's great. Give me half. And the other one says, no, don't cut him. Give it to her. And that's when Solomon knew that was the true mother. Right. And so I use that because I was influenced by that. I use that in the closing argument because that is the thing that I grew up on. That is the thing that I saw. That is the thing, like going to Bethel Baptist Church with my grandmother, with my aunt singing, with my Aunt Undina. She used to be on the board or whatever it is, like a secretary in the church. And so you have that, and then you have outside. So you have, a lot of things going on in the projects. So,
absolutely. If you just tuned in, we are talking to Jason Rhodes, Somewhere Down North. His new book is compelling. I mean, storytelling is amazing. If you haven't ever tuned into us before, go to afro.com. We're 133 years old and a half. You remember that when you were younger and you used to say you were 13 and a half? You would say something like that. We're the oldest Black media company, family owned in the country, in the world, probably. And we're still telling great, beautiful Black stories, like the one we're telling today about Jason Rhodes, and probably a book that you may have never heard of, maybe if you never tuned in, Somewhere Down North, Community Caretaking and the Shape of Manhood. Morgan State University basketball star. I was thinking of a couple other friends who I knew who grew up in the projects of Baltimore, and I just wanted to pull that picture up. Do we have it? Let me see, guys. Do we have that picture?
Oh yeah, that's
right. That was
135 or 159. Yeah,
that's the 135. But when you were saying you in 135, I said, "What is 135?" Mm-hmm. And it was an aerial shot. I didn't bring it, but where the courtyard was, where that basketball court was.
Yeah.
And you had to be able to play to be in that court. I mean, like, and if you didn't know anybody when you went to the projects, you were gonna get beat up pretty much every time. So if you had a friend like Jason and he walks you in, then you got to pass. And Jason like, I'm with Jason, y'all. Just easy does it. Anyway, I digress. It sounds like a beautiful book. My question was, why is storytelling one of the most powerful tools for preserving Black history to you?
Mm-hmm. I think it's powerful in the sense that you're able to demonstrate to others, and this is going to sound crazy, but that you're human, that you love, that you care, that you fear, that you have worries. And, somebody like Toni Morrison, when you read her books, it's so descriptive. She's talking about Black life, Black opportunity, Black oppression. She's talking about, in whatever that time frame is, women being strong in a way in which at that time women weren't expected to be, or they were, someone had a foot on their neck. Mm-hmm. And so even through that, she shows that strength. Somebody like James Baldwin, he'll talk about a story, and he'll say what the person is seeing, and then he'll say what the person is thinking, and then he'll actually paint a picture about what's around them. And so it gives you this almost 360-degree view of whatever it is. Like if you just take today, for example, right? There's what's already happened and then there's what's going to happen. So the exciting part is what's going to happen. What's also exciting is what's happening right now. Mm-hmm. And what may have been exciting was what might have happened before then. Because like when you guys sent me the thumbnail, I posted it, and everybody's like, oh, congratulations, this, that, whatever. That's a community joy. Like they're happy because, a lot of these stories that I'm talking about, it's about the community. It's about what people did in the community, and the names are named in the book, and I always forget people, but, somebody like a Daryl Jenkins, he was like a community organizer, right? Mm-hmm. And he would go about, and then Miss Harry, she's a community organizer. Jonette Mize, she's a community organizer. And so they're, they go another level in keeping the community together. But as far as the writing, I used to interview people for these stories. So it's not just what I'm saying, and I'll give you an example of that too. So I remember block parties in the playground, and they would have these big speakers, and this is around the time rap was just coming in. So you talk about Holy Mel, Treacherous 3, Furious 5, all that type of stuff. And White Plains had its own thing, this group called Luzu. And so that's like R.E., Ralph Camacho, and all these other individuals, Mustafa, Jimmy Edwards. And I remember that, but I only remember so much. One of my best friends, Anthony Roper, he has like a photographic memory. So I said, Ant, do you remember this? And he goes, yeah. And he'll tell you like from beginning to end that we were on the Shade House and we were looking down and LB was spinning and Darnell was doing this and this person was doing that. And so I called a guy, Mustafa, another guy who looked out for me, along with Jimmy Edwards. And I said, do you remember this? He says, sort of. But a better person is R.E. So he gives me R.E.'s number. I call R.E. R.E. gives me book, chapter, verse on Luzu.
Did Mustafa have dreads?
No.
Okay, no. When I went to Morehouse, it was a Mustafa. He was an older gentleman. So I don't know but he would always. Anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, different Mustafa. But Mustafa, he gave me R.E. So R.E. told me about it, and he, like I said, book, chapter, verse, told me what happened. And so let's go with African Bambaataa. Remember African Bambaataa?
Absolutely.
Soul Sonic Force, all that stuff, right? So that's in the Bronx. So that's in the Bronx. That's 20 minutes away from White Plains. So at the time, African Bambaataa and them, they were looking for like satellite groups. And so they contacted Luzu, and they were going to try to bring Luzu under their umbrella, even though they were in the Bronx. Luzu holding its own was like, no, we're not, a part of you, a part of that. We're a part of who we are. Mm. And they stood their ground. And so there was this big confrontation, potential fight. There was a fight, red alert, all this other type of stuff. So you're talking about New York, WBLS, KISS. You're talking about, the origins of this stuff. And they were there and they represented. And so when I'm getting these stories, it's the older generation that's telling me this. Just like when I was in the hospital, I got a lot of these stories from my family because, of course, I was 5 years old, 11 years old. And so I remember what I remember, but they would pick up from there and tell me the rest. Like my grandfather, when he was in World War II, another example of this. He's in World War II, and one of the things, he was a cook, and he was cooking as a boxer. And they had to go into the mountains of Japan. And when they went in the mountains of Japan, the Japanese soldiers would hide in the caves. So they had these flamethrowers, and they had to shoot the flamethrowers into the caves. And so, of course, they came out on fire, and they're dropping in front of them, right? And so he used to tell that story when he came back home stateside. And obviously it affected him. Back then, they didn't really know about post-traumatic stress disorder or anything like that. So he would, drink it away. And my grandmother would take, like I said, he died when I was 5. She would take me to the cemetery, and my grandmother would walk through the cemetery, and she'd be singing. And she'd be talking to my grandfather. She'd be talking to her Uncle Duke. She'd be talking to her sister Ola that died. She'd be talking to her mother. And, typically you're afraid of graveyards. But I wasn't, because the way she was acting, she's singing and she's talking to, and that's how I learned a lot of the history too, because she would always say the same thing over and over and over again. So at the kitchen table, when the friends came over, she would say the same thing over and over and over again. When my Aunt Dina came over, she would say the same thing over and over and over again. When my Aunt Irene came over and over again. So a lot of these are those stories that are in the book, along with the community stories. And so it's important, because you lose that if it's not written down. People pass, people die, people take those stories with them. So and this is back to your original question. I gave the long answer, but it's super important, because you don't have a record of it if it's not written. Or you have a variation that somebody adds this, adds that, said this, said that. So it's not just like, when I say it's a community book, it's a community book, because I actually interview people to get most of these stories. Where my memories stopped, their memories picked up.
Absolutely. I think we're getting close to the wrap. Jay Jackson, jump on in. Your mic came off mute. I know you're itching
sorry
to
about
death.
that.
No, it's okay. All good, man. This is what we do.
So no, I think that's the idea of this book even being sort of almost, it sounds like a community project in and of itself, right? Just my last question to you is, taking that idea of community, and it's, that even goes back to, sort of the African proverb of like, it takes a village to raise a child, that sort of thing. How do you take those lessons and sort of pay it forward to, whether that's to your kids through your work, this idea of keeping that community, that aspect of community still alive, right? Because living in the modern era, there is such a push of like rugged individualism. You don't need anybody. We can all just do this by ourselves. But like, we know in reality that doesn't actually work. And especially in our community, that doesn't work for us. So, you brought up James Baldwin. I actually have a James Baldwin candle behind me.
Nice.
And he has that quote talking about, as far as like living in America, like if you turn your back on the country as a Black person, you will die, right? Like we cannot turn ourselves away from our own community. So how do you take that notion and kind of keep that going forward in your own personal life and in your work?
It's done in several ways. So like, I work in a juvenile court building. So the juvenile court building, where the attorneys meet in the back, and this is what it used to be. Now we're Zoom, and sometimes we go before the judges in person, but for the most part we're Zoom. But back then, we would have these cubicles, but it was open cubicles, and in between your cases, preparing to go down to court to present your case, our clients are the social workers, and then you have other witnesses. And I would always tell these stories, right? And they didn't believe me. They're like, "Oh, that's too fantastic. Oh, what somebody named Mad Dog. You named somebody, who did this, whatever." And they couldn't really understand what I was saying. So when I started to write it on Facebook and got these responses, I would show them that it was real. Right. And they're like, "Oh my goodness, are you really?" It's like, and they're like, "How'd you get through it?" I said, "It was wonderful." Because it was, we didn't have that sense of fear, because everyone was looking out for him. So this guy named Seafood Watts, and this is the last story. So Seafood Watts, when we were in the playground, he was being confronted through a basketball game, and he stood at half court, mano a mano with this guy, and this guy was a hustler, and he reached up and took the guy's eye out just like that, like flicked it out. And the guy turned around and ran to the hospital. Now, for little kids, he was our hero. He walked off that court like in slow motion, like a cartoon character, right? And he's just a good guy overall, period. because he would always, you know, support and protect you or what have you. But those are the things I saw. And so I always try to tell those stories, you know, and even when you tell them, like, people don't believe it. But when I had, you know, hundreds of people backing me up, that's when they believed me.
Right.
You know, through the posts.
And that's a way of, that's a community storytelling, right? Like it's sort of reified. I mean, that's how journalism works, right? It's like you tell a story and someone goes, is that true? It's like, well, I got 9 other people who can confirm this. Like, okay, maybe this actually is true. So yeah, no, that makes total sense.
He said flicked his eye out. I went right to Bruce Lee. I said, hold on now.
It's like, well, how true is this? Here's like Googling it.
Here's what's funny about that. Okay. So this guy I'm talking about, Sifu Watts, his teacher, you know, Bruce Lee was taught by Ip Man.
Yeah.
Right.
Ip Man, you know, had several people that he taught. Sifu Watts' teacher is the person who Ip Man chose to come to America. And that's who he learned, because he went from White Plains and he would go down to Manhattan.
Break it down in layman's terms for people who don't know. So, first of all, you said it was in the middle of the court, and Sifu Watts was fighting a hustler, which in modern day terms is a drug dealer, right?
Yes.
Okay. I'm just trying. I was
trying to be kind.
Listen, but
I was trying to be kind.
I'm just saying. So the new history is video. So this will be archives.
Yeah, that's true.
And
that's true.
even though it's not written down, but it's like it's being written down. It's the amplified version of the written word. But anyway, just to keep it in case somebody's like, they met at the basketball court and one was a hustler and they seafood. So they're like, what are you talking about?
Look, not only was he a hustler, we're going there. Not only was he a hustler, his brothers were hustlers. And so after he flicked his eye out, his brothers showed up and they popped the trunk. And so when they popped the trunk, they went in, put in the on the trench coat, put the guns underneath the trench coat, and came out and walked through the playground looking for Sifu. All right. And so, but Sifu's also
OG. Go ahead. Keep it going.
Yeah, that and military. He has military expertise.
Right.
And he told me not to say certain things, so that's what
I got you. That's fine.
Yeah. So it's that sort of thing. So even if you go like to my Facebook page, right, you'll see a picture.
Did that beef continue, or was it ever squashed, or whatever?
Yeah, eventually it was squashed. But it continued for like a week. So while I'm in the barbershop at Cox and Phillip and getting my hair cut, you know, the guy actually comes in, Sifu actually comes in with his gun, which is, you know, his military issue gun versus what they might have. And he's patrolling. He's standing on top of roofs, you know, getting high ground, waiting for them to come in.
Gotcha.
Yeah. And these are the things I personally witnessed. So it's no, you know, it's like,
right.
It's that sort of thing.
Somewhere down north, it sounds like an exciting movie.
Right.
I guess that's coming soon from the book, the literary rights. Listen, it's been a fantastic day. Thank you, everybody. Sheila, Jewel, Starboy tonight. Anybody else who's watching and didn't comment, hit the share button on any of the platforms that you're on, because this is a story that needs to be told, that a young person needs to read, that an older person can gain value from, our family, community, and how you can make a difference in a person's life. You're like, well, what can I do? One person, and somebody said it earlier, by just telling somebody that they can do it, they finally believe it. And I like to say, you see it on football coaches, because I'm gonna go football for 1 second. Sam Darnold wasn't looking like nothing when he was on the Jet. He was looking like a bum, like he was going to be third string. But then he goes and he flourishes in a different environment. And I think it's all about how the coach speaks to that person. And so we are the coaches. Right now I'm on the box, guys. So I'm just going to take this moment. We are the coaches of the community. We have an opportunity to speak to people every day. And you're like, what can I do? What you can do is you can speak life into somebody else's life. That's a small thing that you could easily do. And Jason, of course, we probably saw each other. We were on the campus at the same time. Thank you for all the work you have done and you're going to continue to do. And Man, I can't wait to see your book as a film. I'm going to speak that into life right now. Jay Jackson, you're officially on the box, and Jason will be on the box last.
Okay. One, Jason, thank you for coming in. We truly appreciate that. The book sounds super intriguing, and yeah, I agree. This probably would make for a pretty good movie, to be honest. Some pretty epic scenes. But I do think, sort of fundamentally, storytelling is such a powerful tool. It is the reason why we have information we have from, not just the last generation or 10 generations ago, but since the beginning of human history, right? This is the original movies. This is the original songs, right? It's just telling stories. And so you're now a part of that long tradition. And I think it is that unique sort of upbringing of getting that skip generation. So you get a little bit of old school, but also you're growing up in sort of this modern era. And that mix, I think, makes for obviously very interesting people. And you seem to have accomplished quite a lot. You and your brother are lawyers, which I mean, we didn't say officially, but that's kind of impressive in and of itself to have two brothers who are lawyers. So clearly your grandparents were a heck of an influence on you, and your grandmother very specifically. So I look forward to reading the book. I think people should definitely pick it up. But I appreciate that you've taken the lessons that you've learned from her, and you've kind of not just like, hey, I learned these lessons, I'm gonna keep it to myself and do well, but also expand it out to your family and to others through your work. So thank you for that.
Absolutely. Final words. Thanks everybody for tuning in. Go to afro.com, get a subscription for less than $40. You can have it for the whole year. You help supporting young Black journalists, and you help us keep telling great stories like that of Today with Jason Rhodes. Jason, your final words. You're now officially on the box.
So my brother had a different outcome. He's not an attorney. He's doing like probation. But
Okay.
I'll say this, that we are what happens tomorrow. And one of the things that I've learned from my life through the people who raised me is to always be kind and to be gentle and to be loving. And I try to carry that forward, as well as impart whatever knowledge I have to not just to youth, but to everyone.
Absolutely. Until next week, we thank everybody for tuning in, whether it's through whatever platform it is. As I say, be kind to a senior. Call them up, your aunt, your uncle, your auntie, your grandma, and say, how's she doing? Send her some groceries. Do something kind. If you can't get around there, bring her some food. She'd love to see you. And call your family, because it's better to gather before the funeral, if you know what I mean. Absolutely. So until next week, thank Asia, our producer, and everybody who tunes in, whether it's live or just catches the replay. Keep being an influence in others' lives, and the Afro will be here for the next 133 years to keep telling stories. You're officially, Jason, in the archives now through video. Can't wait for our new headquarters to open next year, and there'll be tours there, and hopefully you can stop by. Have a great day.
All right.
All right.
Appreciate it.